Welcome to Growing Concern. We're going to talk about the Columbia Generating Station, I believe it's called. I always call it WHOOPS, and I always will refer to it as WHOOPS. The generating nuclear generating station that's up there at Hanford. It's still generating electricity, and there's a lot of issues with that, which mirror the issues that are going on with the nuclear industry in general, worldwide, but we'll talk probably mostly about the United States here tonight. And we have someone who's very knowledgeable about this. We have Miriam Gehrman, who's been on this program once before. I try to remember the situation, but I think you were on with Lloyd Marbett, maybe?
I was, yeah.
Oh, all
Lloyd
right.
was here. Chuck might have been here, I'm not sure.
Chuck might have been here too as well. And there's a lot to talk about this, but I led off with the Columbia Generating Station, which I can understand why they changed their name, but nuclear power plant name WHOOPS is kind of like maybe a little prescience there, because these things are not safe and they do leak, and we're going to probably lead off by talking about that tonight. I got online after before Miriam showed up here tonight, and I couldn't find anything about any leaks at the WHOOPS plant or anything really having to do with anything like that recently. And you were saying on the phone that there has been leaks, and within the process of the nuclear generation, there is leaks all the time. Did I get that right?
Yeah, there's leaks every day somewhere, you know, whether it's at CGS or at a nuke plant somewhere, there's always going to be a leak. The nuclear power plants are so old at this point that they can't help but leak. We have something called neutron bombardment, which affects the wires, the cables, the pipes, the concrete, you know, everything and anything that's inside that building or makes that building gets hit with neutrons from the moment things start running.
Now those neutrons are coming from the rods? They're
coming from inside the reactor. And so what happens is that's really hot stuff. And so it creates embrittlement. And it can create embrittlement in, you know, the harder surfaces. It can wreck, like I said, the pipes, the wires, the cables, anything like that. And it's one of the reasons that nuclear power plants should never have been given a license to last for 40 years, let alone longer, because now they're extending licenses, you know, which they also did at CGS. They actually gave CGS a relicense before its initial license was over. So the reason that we don't want the NRC to come in, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, to come in and relicense a nuclear plant early is because we need that time, they need that time, if they actually did their job, to look at the entire plant and say, what is wrong with this plant? There will be things wrong. So we have to find those things, and then we have to decide, are these things fixable? And if they're not, which they probably really aren't in any form of reality in a nuke plant, that plant needs to be decommissioned. But we don't do that. We, the people, would probably do that. You know, we would say yes to that for decommissioning, but, you know, the NRC never met a nuke plant it didn't love. And that's how it is. They never met a relicensing notification that they didn't love or a new licensing agreement that they didn't love. And that's how that is. So we're completely unprotected. In the world, no matter what country you're in, if you've got a nuke plant, you are unprotected by your government.
You know, we talk a lot on this program about occasionally I should say, about the revolving door between industry and the agencies. Is there one of those for the nuclear?
I could start anywhere. I could start at the International Atomic Agency. You
I was going to bring that one up too.
Yeah, you got that. You've got the NRC, the DOE, down to the owners of the nuclear power plants. And none of these people who are charged with observing and calling out and creating the changes that need to happen do any of that. It's a love fest between themselves and the money that comes in. So they could look at a problem that comes in and just see the money that's going to come in because of that problem. You won't know about the problem at all, but they'll know about the money that they're about to get to fix that problem. If they actually were going to fix the problem, they'll still get the money.
From the taxpayers.
Right, but they won't, or from the government, it depends what it is. But they won't fix the problem. they don't fix the problems. And that's because there's zero oversight that's for real.
So
You know.
is that because that the agencies that are supposed to regulate this stuff are people come in there from the industry?
Oh yeah, it's another revolving door. The same way that oversight on banks or bankers or lobbyists or vice versa. It's the same thing.
Monsanto,
Yeah, it's all the
FDA.
same thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering about. It just seems to me that, you know, that is the mechanism that keeps it from working. And the mechanism that keeps us from knowing anything is called the media.
Right. And you know, CGS has so many problems right now. And to go back to your initial question, which was, you know, how come you don't know that it's leaking, right? Well, we meaning citizens who are concerned about nuclear power plants. We're all in different states. Sometimes we're in different countries. We know each other. We've met after Fukushima blew. We just found each other.
That would be a way.
Yeah. So there are people who are really good at reading the and deciphering the graphs at the EPA, and it's very difficult. It was created as a to obfuscate truth, the EPA's website, and if you get used to it, you can find your way, and that's where you can see leaks in radiation, and they register. So one of the things that I did recently was during the refueling period of the Columbia Generating Station, and again, this is a planned refueling time. So the government already knows that during refueling, radiation is going to get out. They know this, we don't know this, and they don't tell us. So we watch. So we had this moment in Washington to say, okay, what's going to happen? Can we see the radiation leaks? How can we see that? So we watched, like hawks, the EPA graphs, and we also watched from the NRC the events. They're called events. It could be anything that goes wrong during refueling or any other time at a nuclear power plant. If a wire isn't working properly, it has to be reported to the NRC. If it's not reported, they get a huge fine, and it's not worth getting that fine because if they do report it to the NRC won't make them fix it.
They'll just gloss it over.
Right. So why not just report it? You won't get a fine, and you won't have to fix it.
Yeah.
So this is the series of what's been happening for 30 years at the Columbia Generating Station, or whoops. So recently, back in May, just before May, they were preparing for CGS to go down for a planned refueling. They'd take out some rods and move things around and take a look at the plant. Well, every time an event occurred, which was posted on the NRC website, which is nrc.gov, you can go there and look at /events, you'll see them. We went to the EPA graph on the EPA site, and lo and behold, there were spikes every time there was an event. And so I wrote an article for Counterpunch, and it's called Follow the Radiation. And when you follow the events and compare them from the NRC to the EPA, you can see in these graphs that I put together, you know, instead of the NRC being over here and the EPA being over here, they're now in one place. So here's what the NRC is saying, and oh look, here's a graph. And I think that your folks in the booth have some of those graphs.
All right, so I hope they're catching on to this and put some of them graphs up that we can go over them here and find out visually what you're talking about. I think they're in there. I think it's coming up now. Here we go.
Yeah, so you can see that there's an event listed, the date is listed, and we can see spikes on that counts per minute, which is a type of measurement graph from the EPA. And those spikes like that should not be there. We should be looking at lower range of numbers all towards the bottom of that graph, and we're not seeing that. So that's an example. So what's written in red comes from the NRC. That's an event that was given to them, posted by the Columbia Generating Station.
That's all on May 27th?
Yeah. And then we see those, well, at the bottom there's different dates, but it's all in the same range of time.
Okay.
You know? And you can see the spikes. Can we see another graph?
So it takes them a second to switch them out there. There we go.
So you can see where those spikes are, those sort of mountains, those are the spikes. And at the bottom, you can see it's a little bit more, I wouldn't call that stable, but it's lower towards, you know, we're looking at lower numbers down there.
There's less variation too.
Yeah. And that's where things really are in a normal normal time frame. They're low. You
But
know,
even then, there's smaller spikes.
there are smaller spikes. There's a lot of things going on at the Columbia Generating Station during this particular refueling period that were really bad, and that's why we continued following this like with the eyes of a hawk, because we knew something was going on. Can we see another graph? So on this graph, this one's interesting because you'll see a line in the middle. First of all, an event occurred, and then for some reason the EPA turned off the RadNet monitor.
That's that straight line that goes like
Yes,
a...
and the way that we know that is when you turn it off, it stops somewhere. When you turn it back on, it goes to the moment that you've turned it on, and there's a line between the first moment to the moment that it goes back
Kinda like
on,
dead
as far as
air,
a
huh?
radiation monitor. Yeah. So we now see what it looks like when the EPA decides, and they're the ones who decide to do this, to turn off RadNet. When they turn the RadNet monitors off for any reason, we have no idea what's going on. There could be massive amounts of radiation going out, and we have no idea. And we can't know later.
Can we know that they turned it off rather than it just stopped working for some reason?
They'll never tell us that they turn it off. Though they have alluded to that after Fukushima happened, there at the RadNet monitor on the West Coast in Oregon, it seemed that they turned them off. And I think at one point they said, after about 3 weeks, we did turn them off because we didn't need them anymore. In a situation like this, during a refueling, you would never turn off a monitor because the government knows that there are leaks during that time. It's a given. It's not something that they have to lie about. It's just that they don't tell us. So seeing that graph with the line coming up with proof that RadNet turned off in the middle of this, that's something that I'll probably send in a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, to ask them why was this turned off. And my last FOIA that I sent in was basically sent back to me as a rejection of the FOIA. They didn't answer what my request was, so I have to resubmit that. This is a similar thing. I can send a FOIA in and say, why was that turned off? They'll either deny it or they just will refuse to answer.
Well, that line that went straight like that, I mean, nowhere else did I ever see a line that went straight like that. So
Right.
obviously there was, I don't really believe that the peaks were going down. I mean,
No.
so what it looks like to me is it looks like it was going up, and they knew something was going on, so they shut it off until it got down to where it was.
Well, the
It wasn't scary, and then they turned it back on.
Exactly, and
That's my suspicion.
the reason that I believe they did that was due to the event that happened the days just before they turned it off. And when we look at these events, and for those folks who are looking at this article, whether it's on Counterpunch itself or just here on the show, the events are sometimes difficult to understand. They actually clarify, sort of, on the NRC site under the events page. They will create an explanation of what happened, but they won't tell you necessarily the truth of what happened. So just for me, somebody who follows this and understands these events more than the average person, and I still have to go to my teachers often to say, what is this? What does this mean? I know that that event on that graph should have perked up the ears of the EPA, and instead of doing what they should have done, which is continue the flow of RadNet, of monitoring this issue, they just turned it off.
It's disheartening to hear this, because I know that the EPA, you know, they're sometimes all we have to really protect us, and if they're not doing their job, and at the same time we've got the right wing trying to shut them down like they just did,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like there's any hope that people will ever know. I mean, then there's the fact that the people aren't really curious about it anyway, because they don't really realize what danger they're in.
Right, because no one talks about it. And we have ample opportunities right now to talk about nuclear power and nuclear weapons. It's in the news right now. People should
With
be
Iran.
inquiring. Yeah, and people should be, you know, inquiring. What exactly does this mean with Iran? How did they get the nuclear weapons? Are we really going to watch those nuclear weapons? And hopefully we will be over in Iran. And I always say regarding, you know, this particular issue with Iran and nukes is, if they do in fact, if the IAEA does in fact monitor, or whoever it is who's supposed to monitor over in Iran, why don't those same people monitor here? We are completely unmonitored here. We are left to get cancer, is really what it comes down to. And that's the other moment of opportunity that we have. How many people do you know who have no one in their life who has cancer?
I don't think it's possible.
It isn't possible. And that's wrong. You know? Everybody gets cancer. Just about. You know?
We've lost a few people in the last few years. You know, some of them were Agent Orange, which is, you know, another issue, but
Yep.
some of them weren't too.
Right.
So.
Well, it's not to say that, you know, radiation is everything. It's the reason for all cancers. But at the same time, you have your mix of radiation and you have your mix of chemicals, you know, and unhealthy living. But when you do start to question nuclear power and nuclear power plants and understand how many there are in the United States and then in the world, and of those that have exploded, like Fukushima and the fallout that we received for a long time following Fukushima, that wasn't just a moment in time. This is a moment that's 24/7 for the next 1,000 years of us being radiated by Fukushima.
Like those spikes that you see
Like
right
those
there.
spikes, yeah. And it's the same thing. Chernobyl hit us. But those are the obvious ones.
They're just the big ones.
They're the ones that actually explode. When we look at things, Missouri, Calhoun Nuclear Power Plant in Missouri, in July, they had a leak. And that actually made the news. Something happened, there was a leak, and they put it out to the news as it was a safe leak. That's their terminology.
Isn't that an oxymoron?
It's a safe leak. You cannot have a safe leak, you know. You can't have a safe nuclear power plant either. It's not possible. They don't go together, you know. And again, between the bombardment and the embrittlement and on a constant basis, radiation, ionizing radiation coming out and affecting your DNA, you know.
Or that of your children.
Or that of your children,
Yeah.
and your food supply and anything else. It's time for us to stop choosing to, on one hand, deny it, and on the other hand, to stop choosing to be blind to it. There's no reason to. If we all decided to no longer be blind to the leaks of radiation plants, of nuclear power plants, and to understand that those are bombs waiting to explode, all of them, due to, again, the same reasons, you know, embrittlement and age, and the nature of a nuclear power plant going wrong. We might be able to get somewhere with this and shut them down.
Well, they were shut down in '76. Like you say, these are really old, and maybe we did ourselves a disservice by screaming and carrying on and getting them not to build anymore, because they just whatever the word is that you were saying, the older ones that are,
they relicense
they
them.
relicense them
Yeah.
rather than build new ones, which might
Right.
be a little bit safer. So it just seems to me that we ended up getting, by trying to take care of Mother Earth and being careful, we made it worse for ourselves.
Well, we did, and then of course there's the amount of waste that we have anywhere in the world. I mean, and at this point we also have to think globally, not just locally when we talk about waste. You know, we can't just say our waste. We live on one Earth. The waste in India, the waste that will be in South Africa if South Africa does build its nukes, and Greenpeace is working really hard right now at preventing that from happening, and thank you, Greenpeace, for doing that.
And everything they do. And China.
Right. All of that waste is all of our waste. It doesn't seclude itself into one place. Hanford isn't one place. You know, it's a drop-off for sure, you know.
You know, one thing that always strikes me is they say this, I don't know, that you're talking about the waste, and that is the spent fuel rods mainly. I mean, there's other waste too as well. And they say that they protect it, and they say they protect it, but you know, what, the longest civilization that ever lasted was like 1,000 years or something like that, and Britain was about 1,000 years. This stuff's going to last longer than 1,000 years.
Many more, hundreds of thousands.
And our global civilization, whether it lasts or not lasts, there will be areas that will become hot spots. Like, what about any nuclear waste that might be in the Ukraine?
Right.
What's going on with that?
Right.
There's these hot spots will develop.
Yep.
Whether it's an explosion like Fukushima or a hot spot developing, there could be, I don't know if there's any nuclear stuff going on in the Mideast, I imagine there might be.
Well, Israel has nukes.
Israel has nuclear weapons, but are they the only ones that have nuclear generating?
I don't know of any other country out there that does over there. So, I mean, they might. I don't know.
But so, you know,
I don't think
you,
so.
You mentioned Africa. You're always hearing how Africa is just so volatile down there, and they're talking about which countries are talking about.
South Africa wants nukes.
So that's way down south.
You know, the thing is that the discussion about wanting nukes at this point it's arcane, it's insane, it's unnecessary, it's completely not progressive, and it's backwards.
It's not sustainable. They try to pretend that it is, but there is a lot of global warming going on just with the mining of it. You know, there is no carbon-free footprint in the nuclear industry.
Right, only in the PR.
Only a PR.
Yeah, their PR is carbon-free.
Yeah, that's it.
Except when they open their mouths. Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, then they're carbon polluters.
Probably gluten-free too.
Well, you know, the uranium issue is something that I bring up when I see tables out anywhere, whether it's at PSU or anywhere else. I see tables from like 350.org, you know, and I go over to the people who are tabling there for 350.org, and I ask them, are you talking about nukes? And I know what their answer is going to be. Their answer is no, we only talk about fossil fuel. And I ask them, do you know where nukes come from? And they have no idea. And we start talking about uranium. And I said, let's just talk about what you're here for, gas and oil and coal. And let's look at uranium. Uranium kills the indigenous people whose land it is. Anywhere you look where there's a uranium mine, we are talking about indigenous people being killed by the millions.
Sacrifice.
Yeah. And nobody wants to talk about it. Why doesn't 350.org want to talk about this? Why does 350.org want to say things like nukes could be an answer if they were cheaper? That's a lie. You know? And the people who learn from 350.org and become do the work and become the minions of 350.org, they really don't know. So for those listening today, you know, I want them to know that nukes come from uranium. You cannot have a nuclear power plant. You cannot have nuclear weapons without first digging uranium. You know.
And so. And then we also cover the waste on the other end of it. I don't see how they could say that it's, you know, it could be an answer. I mean, they complain about CO2 being emitted and possibly as the earth warms, the methane gas. Well, you know, these things are emitting things that are even more dangerous. And methane gas and carbon dioxide, you know, it can be absorbed. It can disappear. But this radiation doesn't disappear. There's no radiation sink anywhere on the planet, right?
No, it doesn't disappear. In fact, it'll be here long after, you know, whatever happens to be left, it will be radiation in that. The nuclear waste and whatever that is, whether it's the cockroaches that make it through, you know, if it's the cockroaches, then they can, you know, play on mountains of nuclear waste that we've had nowhere to put, you know, anywhere safely. WIPP blew up, the waste isolation pilot plant in New Mexico. That blew up a year and a half ago, maybe 2 at this point.
I didn't hear about that.
Oh yeah, that blew up. Somebody read the memo wrong, and I'm not kidding when I say this. The memo said that Los Alamos is where the waste was coming from for the most part, that was sent over to WIPP for storage. And the WIPP mine is like a mile deep and was supposed to be perfect for like 2,000 years to hold waste. Again, hubris of human beings saying these things. We don't know. Who's been here for 2,000 years? How can we, you know, there isn't a person who's here who can say in 2,000 years this will still be okay, right?
A civilization that can.
So a canister that contained nuclear waste at the waste isolation pilot plant in New Mexico blew up. And it blew up because somebody decided that they would put organic kitty litter in instead of inorganic kitty litter. And the combination of organics with the nuclear waste made it explode. So WIPP is no longer a repository for nuclear waste to be delivered to.
Because
So-
it's radioactive.
It's completely radioactive,
Yeah.
and that had a plutonium and americium leak that went out into the public at large. People were really hurt by that, and continue to be hurt by that because it went into Texas too. The winds blew into West Texas.
So will this stuff hurt? I always thought that it was long-range damage, but it can create, if it's bad enough, it can
If
create.
you were around that plutonium that was released, and the winds can't come in, you know, it's desert. Those winds pick up. That plutonium was found outside. It was found on the ground. So when that blows, wherever that blows, if you inhale that, that's your ticket to cancer.
I've been told that just the head of a needle, head of a pin,
Yep.
ingested into your body,
That's it.
will guarantee
Yeah.
you cancer wherever that
Right.
thing lands.
That's right. It depends on what the particle is, what it's made of, what the radioisotope is, whether it's going to go to your heart tissue, to your bones. If it's strontium, it depends. They each have their placement. But when you inhale a particle, it becomes a part of you. You know,
And it
it's
doesn't go anywhere.
It doesn't go anywhere. It gives you cancer. So this is what we're up against. We now don't have. We now no longer have a repository for nuclear waste that's being generated every day in the United States. Can't go anywhere. So now I think what the next issue is going to be, it's happening now, people are going to try to reopen Yucca. Yucca was already proven ineffective. There was a big fight to shut Yucca Mountain
The
down.
governor didn't want it.
And now it's coming back. It's already coming back because the nuclear power plants, as I said, are making nuclear waste and have nowhere to put that waste.
They must be filling up with their temporary.
Well, what happened was there's a plant in West Texas there's a place in West Texas that's been taking a lot of these containers that were supposed to go to WIPP. And those containers can blow up. They have the same organic kitty litter in them that the container that did blow up at WIPP. So this is just another disaster waiting to happen. And this is what I mean when you start to hear these things and you start to hear and you follow this on a daily basis or even weekly basis, you start to see that everything you thought was safe isn't, you know.
It reminds me of the kid that covers up his eyes and says,
You just-
ha ha ha, you can't see me.
You just want
know.
to.
It's terrible. And then while you were talking earlier about the different peaks and all that, the stuff that's escaping, you're talking of every nuclear power plant has these points that are escaping like that.
Yeah,
and there must be some kind of gathering a residual effect of all these worldwide.
Well,
If it doesn't disappear, it's got to still be there.
right. And again, we see these rises in cancer rates. We see rises in cancer rates around nuclear communities. We see rises in cancer rates in nuclear workers. Dr. Ian Fairley just did another report. He does many reports. He's out of Scotland, I believe. He did a report on the rates of cancer among nuclear power plant workers. And I believe it's 25 or 27% higher than most people. So if folks have people, who are working in a nuclear power plant, their potential of getting cancer is 25 to 27% higher than yours.
I would think that the people living
Yeah.
around there might have
Exactly, it's the same thing.
same thing.
Well,
it reminds me of we've heard of the Mad as a Hatter with Mercury and the civilizations of Rome and Egypt. I think Egypt, they used a lot of lead in their
right.
in their cosmetics and the lead pipes in Rome, and they say that led a lot to at least to the idiocy of some of the leaders, and if nothing else. But over a period of generations and hundreds of years, this was just a slow poisoning of their culture, and they were on the inside of it. There may have been. I bet there was people that saw it, but it never made it into the mainstream of the people, and they continued with the using of the lead. And it sounds like the same thing's going on here. We haven't become any more civilized in 2,000 years.
No,
3,000 years.
in fact, less so. Now that we have fracking, the fracking components, they also have a radioactive component in the fracking fluid. And so now we're
That they
seeing...
inject down in?
Yeah, and so now we're seeing in Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from, in the rivers around the fracking areas in Pennsylvania, we're seeing radiation now in the waters, and it's high. It's not like, oftentimes the people who do the lab work will tell you, oh, it's a very, very small amount. It's not even like that. It's a high amount of radiation in the waters due to fracking. So our level of insanity has increased, you know, and the amount of people buying in to the insanity game has increased. So where are we going? You know, and for me, people always say to me, well, why do you want to, you know, what's it to you at this point with where our Earth is and Earth time that we have left on it? Let's say we have 20 years. Let's say we have 50 years. Just for the sake of talking about it. Why do I care about shutting down the Columbia Generating Station? And I care because the Columbia River is getting hotter. The salmon are dying. The salmon are getting radiated as well. They're finding now that the scales are falling off, their eyes are white, they have different kinds of funguses that they never had before, and the Columbia itself is getting hotter. And the reason that this matters is that the Columbia Generating Station uses its cooling water directly from the Columbia.
If it ain't cool.
And if that's right, if it ain't cool, it ain't gonna cool it, you know. So I don't want to die by the Columbia Generating Station having either an explosion or a meltdown, either way. It is on Hanford's property. It's on the Hanford Reserve. They are 10 miles from 177 leaking tanks. And if there's something that blows up at CGS, those tanks are so vulnerable. And that will wipe us out. Cascadia will be wiped out. And then some, you know.
And then some.
I don't want to die that way. It's just my choice. It's my preference. So in order to not do that, I have to fight the Columbia Generating Station. I have to fight Energy Northwest. I have to argue my point with the public utility districts in Washington. And I don't live there. You know, so for me to argue with public utility districts who do own a vote in the ownership of the Columbia Generating Station, to tell them, yeah, pull your vote. I have to go there. I have to do this. But what I'd rather do is show people in Washington that you also have to take the responsibility to join in this, to stop this insanity, to choose to live beyond the explosion of the Columbia Generating Station, which will happen. If those waters continue to warm, we're not going to have an option. It's not going to be cool.
That's generally what happens to all of them, isn't it? That the water can't cool the.
That's one of the final things that occurs, you know, if not the first. And one of the things that we have at the Columbia Generating Station that people don't talk about is that there's a crack inside a piece of the reactor. It's it has to do with water flow. I can't remember the name right now. It's in my report, but it's within the reactor, and there's a crack. And what Energy Northwest said when reporting the crack is, we've known about this since 2001. We looked at it again in 2005. We decided it hasn't grown. So we want your permission, NRC, to not make us deal with this crack. And NRC said no problem, which is what the NRC's job is to do.
What they do.
That is their job. So I was curious, and many of us were curious, and we called the NRC and said, was there any kind of ultrasound done on this crack? How do you know how deep the crack is? You can visually see this, you know, small, what would appear to be a small crack, but if that crack has anything to do with the reactor, you don't want that crack there. You can't just fix that crack. You have to shut the plant down.
It may not be that small underneath that.
It's exactly right. So I asked the question, which was, have you ever done an ultrasound on the crack? And I did get an answer. The answer was never.
No.
Never has there been an ultrasound.
It's not our job.
And both Arnie Gunderson and Paul Gunter, Arnie from Fairwinds and Paul Gunter from Beyond Nuclear, said this entire plant needs to be shut down and ultrasounded to find out how many more cracks there are, because there are probably more.
More than one. Just as a quick aside, is Heart of America still involved in this?
Heart of America is involved.
Because they were kind
as
of go-to there for
sort
a
of
while.
a watchdog. Jerry Paulette.
Well, that's the one.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of,
he has been you know, he's been helpful. This is a tough project to shut this down.
Oh, yeah.
I would request that he work even harder at creating pressure for sanity among the senators of Washington and the reps in Washington to understand that, first of all, it's a red herring to look at jobs being lost. There will always be
That's a good
jobs
point, yeah.
at a nuclear power plant, whether it's being decommissioned or not. People don't just walk off. What does happen is the unions get thrown out. So that's pretty effed up, you know, that you go for decommissioning, the first thing that happens is the DOE throws out the unions and brings in private contractors who crank the price for shutting down a nuclear plant. It's still jobs, no matter how you look at it, but it's no longer union jobs. Well, you know, again, it's a red herring. The issue is there's cracks in the nuclear power plant. Are we going to talk about jobs here? Or are we going to talk about fixing this
We
thing
talk about
and shutting
health.
this down, you know?
I think if anything comes ahead of jobs, it's health.
Right. So, you know, these are some of the issues that we deal with in trying to shut it down.
Now you're talking about these leaks and these problems. I remember I went to when I first started getting active, I went to a DOE. What a dog and pony show
Yeah.
that always is.
Yeah, I've been there.
But I actually was making some kind of testimony and asked a question, and it turned out that there has been strontium-90 leaking since 1963, and at that point, early 1990s, it was actually made its way into the groundwater, and once it's in the groundwater, it's got nowhere to go but to Columbia. And so this stuff they know about. They've known about it
Yes,
since
they do.
25 years.
Yes, they
So
do.
it isn't just that, you know, this is just a fluke. This is
No.
this is the way they affect their supposedly due diligence for the American people.
Right. And so one of the things that happened recently was we had about 5 sturgeon, I don't think it was more than 5, it might have been, that died in the Columbia. And the question was, why? Was it the heat in the Columbia, or was it other things in the Columbia?
Well,
they're bottom feeders, and
Yeah.
they're very long living species,
Right.
right? Well, Arnie Gunderson has wanted a sturgeon to examine at a lab for a long time, and so I called up to find out at the lab that that he uses to ask if they were aware that these sturgeon have died, and did they speak to the Washington Department of Health to get the sturgeon to do lab work on it for strontium, for that very reason. That's what made me think of it. So the Marco at the lab said he did talk to the Washington Department of Health, and they said they would send him samples. And I wrote him back, and I said, have they sent you those? He said, I have not heard back. And I said, it's all part of the same problem. The Washington Department of Health will not release, and they have these results, and I encourage everybody to call the Washington Department of Health and demand the fish results, the fish samples for radiation, because they have them from 2012 on, and we don't have them, and they won't release them, and I want to know why.
Well, they're probably still looking for a healthy fish to send him samples from.
Yeah, so, you know, this cover-up, and it is
Yeah.
a cover-up, it's massive, it's gargantuan, and we are the ones who are left dying of cancer, and that's really what it comes down to.
Well, it's all because of corporate profits. Because you were mentioning fracking, if this stuff has got some radiation in the chemicals they're pumping into the ground, that's all proprietary. They don't have to tell us what's
That's
in
right.
it. So how do we know that there's radiation in it?
They tested the water,
Oh,
you know, and they've done this numerous
the
times
water
now.
was coming out of people's
Y-
tap on
Yeah,
fire.
you can test the waters nearby any fracking site, and you'll find radionuclides in the water, and that's part of what they're sending down there.
Because on top of that, I mean, with radon, and there's natural occurring
Yeah,
radiation
yeah,
too.
right.
And
But they're
so-
they're looking at things that are radon's terrible. I don't mean to make light of radon. I mean, it's the second largest lung killer in the world. But there's other radionuclides in this water.
It's pretty scary when you think about it. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
think we have any fracking out here, but there's a lot in California. And I'm always getting emails about people shaking their fist and doing petitions against Governor Brown to get him to stop it.
Yeah.
And he hasn't yet. So which means that it just must be the old, you know, profits before people.
Right. I don't know at this point, speaking from an activist perspective, if that's the way to change things. You know.
With
I'm not.
petitions
Yeah,
and-
I'm not telling people not to do them. You know. I
Well,
mean,
it
there's no
takes more
point
than
in doing
one.
that. But I really believe at this point that we need as much direct action as possible, meaning in your face, blocking these things from happening, preventing equipment from working, anything that needs to be done aside from hurting anybody, that needs to be done, you know, and I do call for that.
And that has been done for a long time. Here there was the white train. You familiar with that? It was a white train that some folks stopped. It was running nuclear radiation or something up the Columbia, and people got in there and stopped that for a while. And I mean,
I don't know that one.
It's
So
it's way back.
Yeah, because I got here in '96, so
Oh, it was 20 years.
okay,
10,
I'm
15
gonna
years
look that up.
A friend of ours, Paul McAdams, who used to be on the show, was an old-time nuclear activist, and there's been things going on, and as there has been in the forest.
Yep.
You know, you mentioned some things that made me think about the forests. I didn't write them down, so I don't remember. But there's parallel things there. I mean, which affects a little bit in the forest, affects the whole forest, and the same thing's going on with this too.
That's right, and it's one Earth. It affects the whole system. We are not separate. Your hand is not separate from your foot. It only appears to be that way, but it's not.
Because we can talk about it.
Yeah, you know, one thing runs to the next, and it's the same with our planet.
People don't look at themselves. They think they're a kidney. They think they're the skin. They think they're these different things, but an immune system. But you are all of those working as one unit. You can talk about them as separate, but they all affect one another.
Yeah. So, you know, that's why I call for people to include nuclear in their discussions when they talk about the environment. Because nuclear, when you talk about nuclear, you're talking about uranium, you're talking about the killing of people, you're talking about acceptance of cancer, you know, which has been in existence for a very long time. You're also talking about, by not talking about nuclear, it's saying to me that you don't understand that part of what's killing the Pacific is radiation from Fukushima, that you don't even get it. And it's time, it's 4 years late for you to get that. You know, this is something that's going to happen for the next 10,000 years. You know, we can say, well, how long is that groundwater going to exist in the first place that's running over these 3 cores that are loose, you know? However long that is, that's how long this is going to continue to move into the ocean. And, you know, our dolphins are beaching themselves. Is it just because of, you know, these algae blooms that are creating neurotoxins? And the same with the whales, and the same with the fish, and the same with the birds. It's not one thing, you know? It's not just plastic. It's not just a chemical. It's not, you know, just heat. It's also radiation, it's also plastics, it's also chemicals, it's also this insane amount of cruise ships going out into the waters to take people from here to there.
Who knows
I mean,
what they're putting out there.
Exactly, and what they're dumping. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, and it's I guess you could really say it's also the things you mentioned. But you could probably say underneath all of that and encapsulating all that, it's civilization.
It's us not being responsible for where we live.
Yeah, that's the way our civilization is.
Exactly,
Yeah.
taking absolutely zero responsibility for what my role is in killing this planet, and what your role is in doing the same thing, and vice versa, what we're doing in order to help, at least for the time that we have left, make it a better place.
You know, you're talking about, you know, we're giving everybody cancer. You know, how much money are the universities and the different places sucking up out of the taxpayers through grants or whatever from the government to study cancer? All that is going on, and here we have something that we're not going to be able to stop people from smoking, but we could definitely deal with this issue with these WOPS plants worldwide.
Sure, you just had to pull the licenses. It's
That's
just
right.
that easy.
It'd be that easy.
You know, but they like the other easy because the other easy comes with money. You know,
Oh, yeah.
and for some reason they think that they're immune to their own cancers, and I can't figure that one out. And I think that's like figuring out why somebody has a mental illness. And I do believe these people all have mental illness. And you can't figure out why somebody has a mental illness. It just is. And for some reason, the people who have this particular mental illness go into the nuclear field. And I don't know why. I don't know how they got it, but they have it. And I mean that when I say it. You can't be a healthy thinking person caring individual, able to, you know, live life in a way that is not injurious to others. In fact, you're the opposite.
You're dependent on being injured
And
others.
you know, from the Dick Cheneys and Bushes and Obamas to you know, these nukesters out there. This is an insane bunch of people. There's something not right.
Well, I know that
with them.
there's a lot of reasons why I thought Obama wasn't real, but when he said that as far as energy goes, nuclear was on the table.
Yeah, he's always been like that.
He lost my vote.
He's always been
Yeah.
like that, and he has surrounded himself with the same PR that people get. And you know, everybody, a lot of people need a daddy figure, you know, somebody to say to them, look, it's like this, you know, and then they say, it's really okay. It's this small amount of radiation that's going out there, and that amount won't hurt you. And people want to believe that, you know.
You know, that gets back to a point I wrote down here somewhere. I don't even see where right now, but people, here it is, people are purposely blind because they're disempowered. They don't feel that they can do anything. So they ever do have an inkling. I noticed this in forced activism. You show people these pictures of clear cuts and all that, and you think, but we
Right.
can't let this happen. And it shuts them down rather than activates them.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, I think, even more so with this, because this is, you know, you're forced, people don't really understand necessarily the connection between what's wild and their tame life, but they would have to understand what happens if everything becomes radiated.
Well, the thing at CGS that is on our side is that the people own CGS through the PUDs. So if the people understood, first of all, that Whoops was never killed. Whoops exists, has new name, new look, you know.
It's still
new
Whoops, too.
PR, yeah, right? It's the same place. If people understood that it existed, then they might understand that they can, you know, they're a part of the ownership. And once they realize they own it, they can disown it. And that requires talking to the PUDs and telling their PUDs, we don't want to have anything to do with this, and you need to pull your vote for this. And it's doable. It's absolutely doable. This is not daunting. It's only daunting because people don't know that Whoops still exists. That's what makes it daunting. And so my whole trip is to educate the people of Oregon and Washington. Oregon, so that they understand we don't have a vote, but
Right.
it
With
behooves
Hanford
us.
either, yeah.
It behooves us to teach our friends in Washington that they do have a vote and that this exists. So that's my message. This is a doable thing. We can shut this nuclear plant with a crack in it down. And it is leaking, and it's not just leaking during refueling. It leaks any old time.
And anyone we can shut down would make somebody else's job of shutting theirs down a little easier.
That's exactly right. The dominoes will fall.
That's what we're hoping. You had three pictures. Is there any more pictures that you grabbed?
Oh, no, they were just those graphs.
Just those three?
Yeah.
All right.
And there were a few others, but they're basically the same thing. And again, that article is it's on Counterpunch, and it's called Follow the Radiation. So folks can go there and look at those graphs and check out what I'm saying about them, and follow the links in there, and
Sure.
you know, learn a little bit.
That's just another way of saying follow the money. Actually.
Right,
You get
right,
down to it.
exactly.
Well, with 10 minutes left, I think we might open up the phones, and maybe we got somebody encouraged to call or
Sure.
add to the mix here. There's, you know, I'm sure that we brought a lot of information out, but you know, it's just like anything else. The more information you get, the more information the more questions you might have.
Well, one of the things that I'm doing with the Don't Shoot Portland community and the Black Lives Matter community, more Don't Shoot Portland, is that we're learning together that the things that I'm doing in the environmental world and that others are doing in the environmental world all come from a similar place, which is that our government doesn't care if it kills us. It just does it to us in different ways. And the most obvious and blatant way is how it allows the cops to kill black people. The most insidious way, on the other end, is through nuclear power. So we're at two ends of the spectrum, and we're coming together with this knowledge to understand that our government is not for the people. It is against the people, and it could give a damn about the people. So we need to figure this out and take control.
George Carlin had a really good skit about that. You know, he got a little bit vulgar, but he says, they don't give a about you. They don't care about you. And it went
Yeah.
on for a few minutes, and he you know, they talk about the American dream. Oh, it's a dream because you have to be asleep to believe it.
Right, right. Yeah.
It's a great one,
Right.
folks. Look that one up.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's nobody's. Oh, we got a call. I was just going to move on to something else here, but first caller, you're on the air. First one's a little bumpy sometimes. First caller, having a question or?
How are you?
Oh, we're doing fine. I can hear you now. You hear us all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. So you have any?
I totally applaud the lady for saying our government is not for us. That, you get this stuff, by state, it's legal, government puts the monkey wrench in. I have learned in 62 years of living that I can only speak for Oregon, which I'm just about ready to denounce my citizenship.
It's crossed my mind.
It's crazy. It is just absolutely insane what I see every day of my life. It's just unconscionable.
It is that.
Yes, it takes a whole collective amount of people to get something done. And people better start learning these are our responsibilities
That's
to
right.
have privileges.
That's right.
And I am so tired of looking at the dumb TV with dumb, stupid shows, dumb people.
Well, that's reality.
And walk out my door and think, I have a happy face. I don't want to cause anybody any harm. But I tell you what, where do you think all the teenagers are standing in the summertime? Nobody does anything here except build a TriMet. Not a TriMet, I'm sorry, that light rail.
Oh,
to
right.
me, that was billions of dollars wasted.
Okay. Well, I appreciate we've got other calls.
No problem.
All right.
Have
Hey.
a nice evening.
Thank
All right,
you.
you too as well. We need that input. We're talking about nuclear, but boy, I tell you, the bottom of it all is the government.
Yeah, it
seems
is.
like. So
Bottom, top, in the middle.
is next caller ready? Oh, I guess they hung up. So we can maybe have another one after that. I hope we can get a hold of some people. We've got 6 minutes here left, and
Well, one of the things regarding that woman who just spoke, as far as what our city is or isn't doing, is that we went with a resolution to our city council.
right, I remember that.
Yep, and we wanted to get a resolution passed saying that Portland would not allow any kind of nuclear business, any kind of business that created or built parts or anything like this to the nuclear industry, that would not happen. And we also tried to ban trucks from coming through, but that was too huge. That was
yeah.
national commerce, or
Too much
you know,
at
yeah,
once,
too much.
yeah.
But anyway, they not only refused to look at the resolution, but they wrote letters to me back, that were so rude about the resolution. That I was pretty blown away that was our city council. The mayor's office, I got to hand it to him, Mayor Hales, because I've been trying this for a while now, even pre-Hales. The mayor's office actually gave me 2 sessions with him to talk about it. But because nobody else would fall in line, oh no, we can't do that. And I mean, so yeah, our city council. We all know who watch this show. Our city council is just useless.
Got 2 calls again still. Now, next caller, you're on the air. Should have called the calls earlier. Next caller.
Hello?
Hello, you're
Hello.
on the air. You have a brief question or comment?
Yeah, hi, Miriam. I'm just like to know what you think about the effects of long-term alcohol abuse on Jim's liver. And do you think he'll be around long enough to see Trump's second term as president?
Is this the idiot that called and said that stupid thing last time? Why don't you get lost, man? All right.
Yeah. Okay.
'Cause actually,
Yeah.
I've never been an alcoholic.
Well,
I had my fun with it, but that was it.
I guess he likes your show.
I guess, yeah, at least he watches, huh?
So, hey man, instead of calling in like that, why don't you call City Council and tell Mayor Hales and the rest of them that they should pass the resolution
And be
to
constructive.
make Portland a nuclear-free zone.
Yeah,
That would be a lot more constructive and helpful.
it sure would be. Next caller, if we have that up, because we're down to a little under 4 minutes already. I guess they're gone too. Well, with our remaining time, if we don't get any calls, well, we've kind of danced all around it. But you know, talking about nuclear industry and all that, we haven't really mentioned global warming per se. But that's kind of the excuse that they're trying to use. That you know, natural gas is a bridge fuel, and nuclear energy is
carbon free. That's what they say.
Yeah,
Nuclear energy is carbon free.
We kind of danced
That's
around
the line.
that, and it's not gonna lessen the situation that we're in at all.
That's right.
If only because it's discouraging the use and the research into sustainable energy.
Right, and that's something that we also haven't talked about. Washington State can today move into booster its programs that it already has, in fact, that are renewables. In fact, speaking of PUDs, the Vancouver PUD, which is Clark County PUD, they just bought and built a solar array. They know the direction to go into, right? Mm-hmm. And yet we can't quite get them to pull their vote. So if anybody who's listening wants to call the Clark County PUD, please do, and tell them to pull their vote from the Columbia Generating Station, because they can. That would be one vote down. That would be a very, very big vote. It would be a domino. Mm-hmm. The main domino would start at that moment for the rest of the PUDs to say, well, Clark County did it. It's the second largest user of electricity in the state, so we can do it too.
All these decisions for these elected officials are political decisions, and you give them cover, they might make the right decision.
Well, you know, the head of the Clark County PUD, I believe that he gets a lot of pushback from his partner at home to shut down CGS. And so we all need to get on board and call the head of the PUD here, the Clark County PUD, and say, look, man, do the right thing. You know what the right thing is to do. If you do this, you will be a hero, you will be a leader, you know? So encourage leadership, encourage true heroics.
And participation.
Right.
Because I don't say it every week, but I say it a lot, that the reason why we have profits before people and we have corporations that are basically running the planet is because people aren't conducting themselves as a community.
That's right. And people foster fear. Mm-hmm. They don't foster courage, you know, and we need to help those people who are in positions where courage and strength could be used, but they're still fostering fear, to help them through that, especially in this case with CGS. You know,
Sure.
So Clark County PUD, call them, tell them, pull your vote.
Pull your vote. You know, we got less than a minute. I was going to ask you if you had any final words, but I think you just laid it all right there.
That's a big one. We really can make a difference in Washington State with the Columbia Generating Station for all of Cascadia by shutting down the Columbia Generating Station. And the Clark County PUD is the first one we could go to. If you live in Seattle or you got friends in Seattle, tell the Seattle City Council that they need to get Seattle City Lights, another PUD, to pull out of the CGS.
And get that first small domino going.
That's right. And that's the way to do this. It's not daunting. It just has to be done.
Just has to be done. Well, I thank you, Miriam, for coming on.
Thank you.
You brought a world of wealth of knowledge to the program here. And
thanks for having me.
You got a couple people to call in. I want to thank the callers. I want to thank the crew. And this has been a very enlightening thing for me tonight. Well, we'll try to do it again next week, so please tune in. See you then.